Oh my goodness, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. It's a big day today because we finally got the box of Honda. It's only taken, when did I make that first video? 6 months ago? No, that's a lie. 3 months? It was cold, you can see my breath. But here we go. One box of Honda. We got all the bearings. We got that cylinder. We got a crankshaft. And we got 2 cases on deck, ready to get some stuff swapped out. We also got some gears in here for the transmission, because that was one thing I didn't show. There was a couple gears that were not so good. Couldn't even get all the gears that I needed, but, you know, can't win them all. So, what we're going to do is press the bearings out of those cases, get all the new bearings in, get all that stuff set up, push it all in, or press all the bearings in, pull the crank in, and we're going to put those cases together and see if we can't get an engine. First things first, as you can see, some of these bearings are actually retained, and we got to press those out. That one's probably just kind of sitting there. Those ones, those 2 8mm head bolts, which we kind of refer to as 6mm bolts, oh, excuse me, those will have to get pulled out. And the other style is this. So we'll show a special tool to get those out of there so that you don't end up screwing those up. If you try to do this yourself, we'll get that other bearing out of there, because I'm pretty sure I got every single inside bearing for this thing because it was rode hard and put away wet. That is for sure. So we'll get into that now. Alright, so as you can see, I got everything organized here in a pile. This is some exterior clutch cover stuff. There's just a water pump cover, front brake assembly stuff, just some improper bolts that came with it, so I'm gonna get that swapped back out to the proper stuff. Transmission, crank bearings, output shaft bearing, 75% sure. I'll know when I take it out. That is the shift drum, I believe. Looks like it. That bearing race is thin enough. More transmission, and cylinder slash... Nope, no cylinder head stuff because I got the studs in here. So, like I was saying before, get these new bearings in. We're going to get all of these new bearings right here. Everything here is going to get switched, and then it's going to go back together in this case. Or excuse me, it's going to be ready to go back together finally. So that's good. Let's get to it. Alright, we got one side done. Fresh crank bearing. Nice and quiet. Fresh trans bearings. Nice and quiet. Sounds good. Alright. Now for this one, pull out this trans bearing. This is staying, the shift drum bearing. And I will bust out my impact driver and get these 2 tools out these 2 screws out right here. We'll get that bearing switched out as well. And just like that, those bearings are out. So as you can see, this bearing actually has a recess in it, and that's for those locking tabs to sit into. This guy right here. So that tab actually sits in that bearing and makes sure it doesn't go anywhere. Now to get these out, I've seen a lot of people just like strip these, trying to hit them with a screwdriver. So what you want to use is a tool called an impact driver. And as you saw in the time lapse, I was actually hitting it with a hammer. So you turn it in the direction you want to go, You push down a little bit and you load it up, and then you hit it with a hammer. And that downward force and it hitting that cam on the inside actually makes the screw turn. So as that screw turns, you can loosen these up. Do they work? They work like 7 out of 10 times every time. I mean, I've had instances where you actually just take out the Phillips head like completely, and then you gotta hit it out with a chisel, which kind of sucks, but most of the time it works really well. It's actually a pretty neat tool for how simple it is. But time to get these 3 bearings in. 1, 2, 3. And we're gonna bust this crank out of the box, transmission back in, and we'll be ready to go back together with the shifting assembly, change those transmission gears, and then finally we'll get the crank in there as well. Okay, fresh, ready to go. Now let's deal with this transmission. Okay, so here I have a good gear. This one's brand new. So you can see how the dogs are nice and square. They got a good square edge on them. And here's what I pulled off the shaft. Super hard to see, but there's a rounded edge on them. So that can lead to actual transmission slipping, and the gear will start jumping off and on the drive there, and that can be a pretty big issue. So let's get these gears swapped out, get this transmission in, and get that crank in. Guys, so in that time lapse you saw it get a little bit hectic there when I was trying to install a transmission. Long story short is the one gear that I got is somehow the wrong gear, even though it's supposed to be for this engine, and yeah, I just ended up having to swap it back to that other one, and then I got the cases together here, as you can see. So cases are pulled back together, kept them covered up to keep them clean, obviously. And now that all these case bolts are tight, got the center gasket in, crank's happy, it's all centered up, all that good stuff. Gonna go ahead and put on all the clutch side stuff right now. And after we do that, like cover it up and all that stuff, obviously, and then we're gonna move over to the ignition side. I might do the ignition side, but I might just do the top end, just since it's less of a hassle, because the way Hondas work, the whole wiring harness is attached to the stator. So that's a little bit of a pain in the butt. So if I can leave it till the end, then so be it, that works for me. So let's get into it right now and get this clutch side back on. All right, she's back together. Well, almost all back together. It's all freshened up, fresh gasket in there. Everything's tight. You probably saw in the time lapse where the parts where I was using an impact gun. So when you do the crank, you want to hold the crank. You want as little movement as physically possible, and obviously that's just to help tighten up that crank bolt there. And with the clutch, the nice part about tightening a clutch is how it's basically a liquid brake, like it's a brake in a liquid. So all I really do most of the time is I just push on the clutch pack, and that acts as like that brake, so it pinches it all together, it stops all the movement, and you can get it tightened up. Don't forget your lock washer on the clutch, obviously. So we got that in there, got it all folded back, so just in case it does loosen off, it's not like completely loosening off, and it'll give you some telltales before it actually turns into some bad news. Got a brand new water pump cover on there with a fresh gasket, fresh seals. You saw me put in some fresh seals. We got a fresh crank seal, fresh kick seal. There is a shift shaft or the actuator arm seal on the other side. As we get over there, we'll be replacing some more seals. So right now, my focus is up here. I got a fresh cylinder right there that needs to get all prepped up with some fresh dowels and all that good stuff. That's the small end bearing right there. But before I throw the new piston in, you'll notice that there are actually some holes here. So the purpose of these holes is to lubricate that bridge that you'll see up in here. Because if that bridge gets hot, it actually expands faster than the rest of the cylinder, and it'll actually move into the piston travel area, and it'll crack, or it'll just crack from the heat alone, and those things can break out, and then you got problems because the piston comes down on the next time by with the ring lamp popped out, and you got some serious issues. So what I'm gonna do now is mark out that piston and do some measurements here. Luckily, it looks like it's right in the middle, which is pretty nice. So I'm gonna take some measurements, get those holes marked, and then pass them off into this fresh cylinder that we got right here from Athena. Get that in there, and yeah, top end can go back together. Don't forget to put a drop of oil right here on the fresh roller bearing down there. And you're obviously gonna want oil up top here in your small end bearing, because those particular parts don't see oil like instantly. They'll see them after like, I don't know, not even 30 seconds of runtime, but you don't want anything dry, right? So get that going, get that in there, be done with the top end, have that good, and then we'll flip it over and move to the ignition side and get that all back together. All right guys, one cylinder ready to go. So as you can see, we got the power valve actuator in there. Well, the arm mainly, the actuator is actually right in there. Cleaned up them power valves, so they're ready to go. All I have left to do now is actually, you want to, even though this cylinder is brand new, it's still good practice to actually take brake cleaner and a clean shop towel there, and you'll actually want to wipe out the inside of it, just to make sure there's no dirt and debris or anything that you got in there while assembling the cylinder, or it just came like that from Japan. They're usually really good about keeping like fresh stuff clean, obviously. So we'll get that done. I got the piston prepped here, so that's all good. I actually just ended up measuring the skirt, doing half the distance, because luckily on this particular piston, the bridge is right in the middle, and it lines up with the it's in the middle of the skirt as well. So I measured across, and I actually took a square and I ran a line all the way up, and then marked my holes, drilled them, and then gave them a quick little countersink with that guy there after drilling them through, because you don't want to have any edges scratching your brand new cylinder, obviously. So now, without further ado, let's put this thing back together and seal up this giant hole. I've already gone ahead and poured a bit of oil down there on the big end, just to get it lubed up. So you'll see in the time lapse I'm only going to put oil in the small end bearing, and we'll go all together, have all that good, get her nice and fresh, and then finally be done with the top end and the this side of the engine, and then we can move to the ignition. Alright, she's looking like an engine again. That's some good news right there. Fresh piston. Everything went fine with lining up against the exhaust port. I just gotta do some quick buttoning up things, like put this exhaust flange on, get the head studs back in it, reed block, and there's a drain on this side that I gotta deal with. But can't have these head studs going looking like that. So let's clean them up real quick. Alright, well that was easy. Now let's just toss them in there real quick. Bam! Just like that. That YouTube magic. Alright, let's get a fresh head gasket on that, and then button up this top end for good. And finally, get over to the ignition side and get her all dialed in. And then that should be about it, because that's easy to do. I don't really need to show you that. And then she's ready to go back in the bike. So, got this exhaust flange back on, as you saw. Got this cylinder head back on. I just stuck a plug in it. This one's not new. I just want to, you know, not have any debris going in the brand new cylinder. Got the reed block on. There was a spacer plate in there for a little bit more torque, but unfortunately I don't have enough gaskets to utilize it right now. So for right now, it's just the reed block and the boot. I checked for clearance on the crank to make sure the actual crank doesn't come around and hit the reed block. So that's good news. Step in the right direction. So now I move over to the ignition side. We've got a fresh seal in there, so I'll just plop that in. I'll push that on in a second. And there's one more thing that we need to harvest here from the old parts, and that's this this pin that I can't remember the name of, key. So we're gonna pop this key out, get the key in there, put the seal on, put the key on, and then I have to open the box again, but we'll get the stator out and the flywheel and get all of that stuff installed. I am not going to be putting the ignition cover back on because there's no point, because you have to hook up the clutch through here and all that stuff. So with that being said, that is what's going to happen now. And yeah, let's get to it. There she is. Man, this feels good. This thing's been apart for a long time. So yeah, flywheels on. Got the seal in here for the counter shaft. I have the all the internal stuff for the counter shaft in here. But yeah, that engine's back together. And that's gonna do it for this vlog. In the next one, we're gonna put Humpty back together again, and by Humpty I mean that thing over there, and see if she can't make some noise, because that'll be great. I miss the sound of a two-stroke. I don't know about you, but yeah, that's gonna do it for now. Like I already said, gotta stop doing that. Anyways, if you wouldn't mind liking, commenting, even subscribing, hitting that little button down there, it helps me out. I know I'm just getting started. I only have like 11 subscribers, but you know, it's fun. I enjoy doing this. But yeah, that's everything for now. We'll see y'all in the next one.